question I basically want to ask is this. How can the law use the empirical evidence, especially that from the social sciences, wisely? And I'm not going to try to develop a definition of wisdom. I'm just going to adopt one and then ask, can we actually accomplish it? Now, unfortunately, my definition seems to comport pretty close to what Valerie came up with, so if you don't like my definition, please feel free to complain to her. And basically, it's oversimplifying a bit, it consists of two prongs. One, having extensive knowledge, and two, using that knowledge well. And I want to focus on both prongs. On the knowledge prong, I want to improve the way the social sciences produce empirical knowledge. My general sense I'll explain is they tend to produce it remarkably poorly, and there's structural reasons why we do a very bad job of producing it that we have to fix. So what's my concern with the way the social sciences in particular produce empirical knowledge? Well, we have the wrong philosophy of science. We're basically lying to ourselves. We believe we're following the footsteps of Karl Popper, that we're engaged in this noble deductive hypothesis. We're going to propose a hypothesis, I'm going to prove it wrong, I'm going to say all swans are white, I'm going to find that one black swan, and my one paper will show that this hypothesis is wrong. And encourage us to focus on that one original paper. That's not what we're doing. If you actually read an economics paper, you discover that it's a pure patina of Popper with something else completely different underneath, which is induction. We're actually trying to estimate effect sizes. We're not trying to prove that all swans are, we're not trying to disprove that all swans are white. We're trying to count how many white swans are out there, how many black swans are out there. It's a fundamentally different enterprise, and our entire method of testing things is wrong and built around sort of a wrong attitude. So my solution is to move away from these sort of informal authoritative reviews, it's a rough term, I'm trying to think of a better one, to these much more rigorous systematic reviews. Just to give a brief sense of differences, every review consists of basically the same three elements, and you have some way of assessing quality, you somehow gather up the studies, and then you synthesize the results. So what sets the systematic reviews apart from these more authoritative approaches? Well, first of all, for a systematic review, the goal is to develop these, your sort of objective quality guidelines. You develop the manual for the monkey to use in advance of reviewing the studies. Before you start looking at the literature, you say, here are my assessments of quality, rather than sort of reading an article and deciding as you read it, is this good or bad? In the general sense, this kind of ex-ante design mitigates a whole host of biases that can creep into quality review if you sort of make up your assessment of quality as you're reviewing the study itself. So the three benefits we get from this approach is, well, greater transparency, of course, much more comprehensive, and much more objective at the end. So it's a much clearer picture. And in theory, it's a much more powerful approach, although it has its problems, which I will get to in a moment. So what are some of the challenges we face? One, just defining quality. If you read the reviews that exist in medicine epidemiology, they don't actually define quality and then deduce quality standards from it. They actually sort of grab a whole handful of quality standards, throw them in a pot, and some definitions of quality might be inferable from those standards, but different reviews are going to have different definitions of quality because they've never defined quality up front. So we need to reach a definition of quality, but quality is an incredibly difficult normative concept that's going to vary from context to context. What is a relevant quality definition for sort of an academic article might be different than what it is for, a government agency has to decide by tomorrow what they're going to do. As a result of these, different definitions of quality and the challenges, we're going to get different guidelines reaching different conclusions. This is actually a big problem in epidemiology. 25 guidelines for each 25 different conclusions. It seems like I'm just rolling back the opaqueness, right? Each guideline is completely transparent, but the choice of guidelines is now the opaque, authoritative. You didn't trust my guideline, you trust your guideline. All I basically done is kind of roll the ball back one stage. So my proposal to move away from the dueling partisan expert, in fact to abolish the dueling partisan expert if at all possible, to our systematic reviews developed by independent experts. And again, perhaps the biggest challenge I face here is the cultural one. Judges actually can get about 95% of the way I want to get them to on their own. They just don't like doing it. Adversarialism is deeply rooted in our culture. It's not the judge's place to create an expert to produce his report, even though there's 3 different ways you can do it. So part of it is just trying to convince judges that, look, not only are these kind of reviews consistent with the truth-finding goal of adversarialism, but adversarialism embodies other normative values as well. It's not just about the truth. It's about sort of party control of a government institution, having opportunity to have your voice heard, and to show how you can reconcile this kind of independent, bureaucratic approach with these other goals that adversarialism embodies. And I think you can, but it's important to demonstrate to judges that they're not actually giving up the underlying normative values when they move away from the dueling partisan experts. The last point here I'll just touch on briefly is there's a challenge of uncertainty here. Systematic reviews tend to produce much clearer indications of uncertainty, make us much more aware of, to use perhaps what was, though it was mocked, a remarkably astute epistemic phrase spoken by one of our previous secretaries of defense. They make us know what our known unknowns are. And the fact of the matter is the law detests a known unknown. They like to view known unknowns as issues of facts for juries to decide, rather than saying that there's no issue for a jury to decide. If it's a known unknown, we're done. It's unknown. But at the same time, we use our law in a lot of regulatory ways where we want to allow a jury to make a finding in the presence of a known unknown. The law's going to have to adapt its procedures to account for this greater epistemic humilius coming along And I think it's essential for it to start wrestling with it, and it hasn't even begun to start doing that yet.